I believe we're ready to begin. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. It just warms our heart to have such a wonderful group of people here today to listen to Rick. So my name is Mary Ellen, and Clay, my husband Clay, and I had the good fortune of hearing Rick speak about this topic in November and December in Boulder. And I told him that the Namaqua community and Fort Collins community, this whole area, would be very interested in having him come here so that more people could learn about the work that People of the Sacred Lands has been doing about this commission report and how we can be allies. So how we can help, because all of us here today, that's what we want, right? We want to be able to help. So I want to mention that. I want to start by acknowledging that this is the sacred land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute people, and the Lakota and many other native tribes lived in Colorado, as we know. So this is their sacred land, and we acknowledge that today as we do every Sunday here. A bit of housekeeping I want to mention for those of you who are new here that we have restrooms in the building behind us here. We don't have water in this building. So for any of you, that door is unlocked. And there's some children playing over there whom you could say hello to as well. So also I want to mention that I did put a donation basket in the back. If anyone wants to donate anything to Rick Williams and the People of the Sacred Land and their work, you're welcome to do that. Clay was handing out some pieces of paper. Rick will speak to that. It's about the Moral Act and how the American Indian tribes gave land to so many of the public land universities. And that's something that most of us don't know about. So he's going to mention that as well. So I'm going to take a minute for those of you who might not have read his bio to read this as well. Oh, also I want to say that we're going to have a potluck afterwards for everyone, whether you brought something to share or not. We want everyone to be aware that they're welcome. To have more time with us and Rick and to break bread together. And it'll be in Parker Hall behind us as well. So please know that you're welcome, whether you knew about the potluck or not. And with that, I will read about Rick. Richard B. Williams, Oglala Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, is a passionate and committed advocate and fierce champion of Native education in the United States. From 1997 to 2012, he served as president and CEO of the American Indian College Fund, a national nonprofit scholarship fundraising organization for American Indian students attending tribal colleges and universities, which provide culturally based education and are run by the tribes. Okay. At NARF, oh. Oh, my hand is shaking, I must be nervous. At NARF, Williams worked on landmark cases concerning the civil rights of American Indians in prison. With the assistance of Wallace Black Elk, a Lakota medicine man, he helped build the first sweat lodge at a correctional institution. He also developed a plan to build a 50-bed minimum security prison on the Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota, where he served as the first warden. It was during this time that Rick learned and studied the political and social processes that influence the effectiveness of tribal governing entities. At the American Indian College Fund, Williams has raised more than $200 million for scholarship support for Native students and support for the tribal colleges and universities since 1997, including helping 17 faculty members complete their doctorates. In 2007, Williams received an honorary doctorate of humane letters from Roger Williams University in Rhode Island for his work in Native education. So we are so honored to have you here, Rick. Thank you. One more thing, we are going to have, so Rick's going to speak for an hour or so, and then we're going to have question and answers for the last half hour. So we can bring the mic to people or however people are comfortable for that later period. Okay, thank you.
Bedako yapi, lelon betuki ata lelo washtelo. Lakota imachiapi tatanka huhaska na milahaska amachiapi Rick Williams. Mie Oglala Lakota na ake shaela. Greetings, friends and relatives. I introduce myself in the Lakota language. My Lakota name is Tatanka Huhaska, which means a long-legged bull buffalo. It was given to me. It could be translated to tall bull, but it was my grandfather's name, and I got it as a child. I'm Oglala Lakota. That's where my citizenship is, and that's important to especially today. Because if you get stopped and you can't prove that you're a citizen of some place, you get in trouble, right? I also have relatives, descendants on the Northern Cheyenne and the Southern Cheyenne. Northern Cheyenne's the White Eyes. Southern Cheyenne is a famous leader by the name of Whitehorse. Whitehorse and my great-great-great-grandfather on the Oglala side, Old Smoke, used to winter in the Cherry Creek area in Denver by the confluence. I'm going to begin with a little bit of interactive stuff. I have high expectations of you. Mary Ellen says you guys were all above average intelligence and that you learn quickly. So I'm assuming that I'm not going to but one of the things I like to do, and it's part of our our ways, is develop a relationship with you and maybe teach you one word in an Indian language. So it's going to be the Choctaw language, okay? Let's try again. Choctaw language, okay? There you go. Now you guys can all speak one language. I've always wanted to have this opportunity to, but I'm going to ask you guys all to move upstairs because I always wanted to speak to the choir. You hear people say that, it's like talking to the choir. Well, let's just pretend you're the choir today, okay? Inachopo, listen. Can you hear it? There's a story coming. I'm going to tell you a story. This story is about this land and the people of this land. And some of the work that we've been doing about the history of this land. A little over 3 years ago, I decided to study about my great-great-grandfather, Whitehorse. And I learned a lot. And in that process, while doing that, I came across these two proclamations. They were proclamations by the governor of Colorado, the territorial governor, who was also the superintendent of Indian Affairs in Colorado. And in his proclamations, what he said in the first one was that all Indians in the state of Colorado had to go to where the Sand Creek Reservation was after they had been taken, after their land had been allegedly taken in the Treaty of 1861. And that didn't work very well. So his second proclamation was he authorized all citizens of Colorado to kill Indians and take their property. Highly illegal, but that's what the proclamation said. And I was shocked when I learned that. I lived in Colorado. I've lived in Colorado 54 years, and I thought I knew our history. I thought I knew about our people. And I learned that I don't know very much. I didn't know very much at all, and I'm learning. So one of the things, because I have somewhat of a legal background, I said, are these proclamations still a law in Colorado? Are they still on the books? So they call on the books legally. So I asked around and had a source who was this friend of mine who was in the legislative branch in the Senate, and she went to the Attorney General's office and made the inquiry about the proclamations, and they were still the law in Colorado until 2 years ago. We worked to get them rescinded. I worked hard, a year and a half, to convince Polis to get those rescinded, and I finally got it done. And it was at that point that I made up my mind, and in help with a lot of our relatives, we decided to learn the real history of Colorado, because what we knew just didn't fit, and it was a challenge. It was a horrific challenge, because one of the things that I learned in the process was that a lot of this stuff was hidden, and it was a secret, and it was a mystery. So it was almost like trying to go back and try to recover information that was being kept from people. And for 100 years, this information was hidden. And people ask me, Rick, how can you say that? How can you say that this information was hidden? How come, what's your authority on that? And I tell them, you only have to look at Governor Evans. You look at that man was the one who was the single person that was the greatest. He was the one that caused Sand Creek. No, he has to take the blame for that. And even though he was indicted at Sand Creek for at that massacre, he was never convicted, walked away scot-free, and lobbied the Colorado citizens, and got himself a real nice, cushy job with the railroad. And so what did it take? What did it take to create an environment where you have, without a doubt, the Sand Creek Massacre was the greatest display of inhumanity in America ever. If you read the accounts, I don't like to talk about them, and the relatives of the descendants don't like to hear it, but you can find out about the brutalities and the mutilations and crushing baby skulls and all of it. It's there in the reports if you look for it. After Sand Creek, the military comes back to Denver, and they have a parade through Denver. These military people are riding their horses, and on their saddle horns are displayed women's private parts. They get to the Opera House, and they all go in there and they're talking, they're celebrating this great victory over this slaughter of Indian people. At that time, because it was such a big deal, a new Indian commissioner had been appointed. His name was Doolittle. He came out there and he spoke to the audience just like I'm speaking today. And he said, you know, we've had a great victory over the Indians, but there's still some that are left. What should we do? Should we try to civilize them, or should we exterminate them? And the crowd started roaring, exterminate them, exterminate them, exterminate them. For you see, that's the mentality of the people of the time. And I think that's part of the reason why this thing was kept secret. I only discovered what I know partly because of a brilliant author from Boulder. Her name was Margaret Cole. She wrote a book called Chief Left Hand. And I was reading that book, and in that book I found a footnote that mentioned an article entitled Prelude to War. I went and I got that article and I read it. And I'll tell you later about what I found. But so when I'm looking at the overall time period and everything, one of the things that always puzzled me is why are there no native reservations on the Front Range or Eastern Plains of Colorado? You know, the most beautiful land, the most beautiful place in Colorado, you know, and just a precious, like a paradise. But there were no reservations. And so, you want to go to the next slide, Clay? So what I'm going to help you with today is a brief description of the worst treaty violation in American history. I used to believe, as growing up and in my adulthood, that treaties were a good thing. I thought that people talk about treaties, and that my mind has been changed. Let's go to the next slide. So, we have to go back, and I think I'm going to take you through time, and to help you understand about what was going on and how it happened. In 1834, the United States government passed a congressional act called the Indian Trade and Intercourse Act of 1834. And in that act, the area you see in red was designated as Indian country. And this is a critical piece to what we're going to talk about as we go forward. It's the foundation of the establishment of whose land it is, and how does that relate legally to what happened. It's pretty. There's a couple of things that I guess I would note. Is one of them is part of the land was still owned by Mexico at this time, so you have the Treaty of Guadalupe that has an impact. But let's go to the next slide, because I want to read this as the Indian Trade and Intercourse Act. And probably the most important part about this is it says, talks about the areas included, and not within any state in which Indian title has not been extinguished for the purpose of this act shall be deemed Indian country. And what that means is Congress has certified all of that land in the red area as being titled as Indian territory, an official congressional title. That's the best title you can get, is a congressional title. There's a nice little map on the next slide. It actually shows Indian country, and it shows a couple of the reservations that existed in that period of time, some of the people who were living there. I know it's hard to see, and I don't like to use it, so I kind of gloss over it. It really just does, it just gives you an idea about the size of the land and some of the people that were there. But let's go on to the next slide, because this is, I think, one of those ones that are really important. This is section 11 of the Trade and Intercourse Act. And basically what this says is nobody is allowed out in that red area. It's illegal to be out in that red area. And if you're caught out there, you're going to be caught, you're going to be removed, and you're going to be fined $1,000. The only people that could be out there were military people and traders with license. If you had a trader's license, it cost $5,000, you could be in this territory that we should. Otherwise, you're not supposed to be here. That's what the federal government said to that, about that land. Why were they doing that? Why do you think they said that? I understand now. They were very guilty because in the previous years, just before this, they had removed tribes from the east. And you know, you have the longest walk of the Cherokee, and it's a brutal history about removal. And I think they felt guilty about that the removal of tribes from the east to Indian country, and they wanted to make sure that Indian people were protected going forward. And so that's why that act was passed. Let's go to the next one. So, you know, you move through time, and all of a sudden we have a gold rush in Colorado. 1858, gold's discovered along the Cherry Creek, and the word gets out. Interestingly enough, it was a Cherokee Indian who discovered gold in Colorado. And the reason that he discovered gold is because they had been removed from Georgia, and the reason they'd been removed from Georgia because there was gold there. And so when they got moved to Oklahoma, he was in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and he made a journey out to the gold fields in California and was out there for a while. And on his way back, he stopped in Colorado, and he saw gold in Cherry Creek. He said, "You guys, there's gold here," and everybody got excited about it. And there was this rush to Colorado. In that first year, 1858 to 1859, almost 100,000 people came into the area. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine this area just being flooded with people? Wasn't there something about nobody's supposed to be here? Wasn't there a law that said that these people were supposed to be fined and removed? Or maybe they didn't say that. You know, it's kind of suspicious when you're dealing with Indian affairs. I've grown accustomed to expect fraud and deceit. Look at the wall. Boulder City, Nebraska Territory. Where's that at? Where's Boulder City, Nebraska Territory? Yeah, Boulder, Colorado. Before Colorado was a territory, the territory was in Nebraska. Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854. All this territory was. And lo and behold, because of all these people showing up in the area, this land company, they meet in Sidney, Nebraska, and they mark out all of this land. That's downtown Boulder. They mark out all this land, and they proceed to issue titles. All these lands, each one of those are sold for $1,000 each back then. If you look at the date, it's 1859. One problem. They didn't own the land. There was no treaty. There was no treaty even negotiated in 1850 and 1859. They didn't own the land. How could they do that? It was illegal, and they weren't even supposed to be there to begin with. So you have this continuing pattern of illegitimacy, and you know, it just manifests itself. And so because of this rush of people, there was the need to create a different territory. So we have the Enabling Act in 1861 creating Colorado Territory. And Congress passes this act and it enables it. And there's some specific language in there. It says, let's see, it says, temporary government in the name of Colorado provided, nothing in this act contained shall be construed to impair the rights of Indians in the said territory. So long as the rights shall remain unextinguished by treaty between the United States and such Indians, or to include any territory which by treaty with any Indian tribe is not without the consent of said tribe to be included within the territorial limits and jurisdiction. It basically says the United States, Colorado, when it became a territory, was obligated to protect Indian land. You know, when you look at this, this is what makes Indian history unique. You have these specific legal actions where it mentions American Indians specifically. It's the foundation of a long-standing political and legal history with, these are supposed to be legal binding documents. The Intercourse Act, the Enabling Act, they didn't hold up to their honor. So in 1861, everybody's concerned about what's going on. We got to do something about this, right? We got to get a treaty with these Indians and get their land because we're here illegally. We got to fix this, right? So they come out and they plan a treaty with the tribes who own this land, and it's a combination of the northern Arapaho, northern Cheyenne, and the southern Cheyenne and southern Arapaho who own the Front Range and most of Colorado in the eastern part. Those were the two groups that, or the three groups that really had legal title to the land via and boundaries because of an earlier treaty. But they figured they're going to, we got to figure out a way to get this land from the Indians. So they made a mistake. Commissioner Greenwood sends runners out to the tribes and says, we want you all to come to Fort Wise. We want you to come there because we want to talk to you about your land, and we want to take some of your land. And so the southern tribes, being more impacted by that action, agreed to come. The northern tribes, the northern Cheyenne and the northern Arapaho, when they were asked to come, they had a meeting. The Council of 44, one of the most sophisticated form of governance in the United States at that time, next to the Iroquois Confederacy, they met. And the Council of 44 said, we're not going to give up any of our land. And they moved it down to their societies, and the societies said, we don't want to give up our land. And so then they let the women involved in the discussion. And the women said, we don't want to give up our land. So they made a decision not to go there. So the northern Cheyennes and the northern Arapahos never attended this treaty session. And so they go ahead and do this anyway. So the southern Arapaho and the southern Cheyenne meet, and they construct this treaty. And in this treaty, there's language that. So get a load of this. This is with the Arapahos and the Cheyennes. So the government Indian agent hires an interpreter. And this interpreter says he can speak Arapaho. But he can't. 2 years later, he admits in court that he couldn't speak the language. So how could you possibly, and especially this treaty was one of the most erudite treaties I've ever read. How could you possibly have that kind of thing going on without an interpreter? That's the typical kind of thing that we saw in our findings. Margaret Cole notes that in her book. In one of the footnotes, you'll see that. I'm not making this stuff up. I have documents that show all of this stuff, that the actual testimony about him, saying he couldn't speak the language. Well, when you look at the treaty, they knew there was a problem. They knew they weren't getting the Northern Cheyennes and Northern Arapahoes in. And so they included an article. Let's go to the next page. Article 6, the Cheyenne and Arapahoes of the Upper Arkansas, parties to this agreement, are anxious that all their members of their tribe shall participate in the advantages herein provided for respecting their improvement in civilization, and to that end to induce all those who are separated to rejoin and reunite with them, provided, however, they do not rejoin or permanently reunite themselves with the tribe within 1 year from the date of the ratification of this treaty, shall not be entitled to the benefits in this stipulation. Treaty benefits were you were going to move to this desolate part of southeast Colorado where there's no water and there's no buffalo. That's the reality of it. These people said, they're not going, we're not going down there. They refused to come in. They had a year to come in, and they said, no, we're not going to. That's what Article 6 was about, trying to get them to come in. They said, no, we're not coming in. We're not going to do that. Nobody ever signed. To this day, nobody's ever signed releasing that land to the United States. To this day, nobody has ever signed releasing that land to the United States. So what am I talking about? What's the scope of the land? So if you go to downtown Denver and you go to the confluence of the South Platte River and you look to the west, you follow the Platte River all the way down to where it goes up to the Continental Divide. You follow the Continental Divide all the way up to Casper, Wyoming, a place called Red Butte. You follow the North Platte, where it comes down through Wyoming, right by Scotts Bluff, Nebraska. You follow the South Platte River, where the two of them meet at North Platte, Nebraska. All of that land was never ceded by the northern tribes. All of that land was taken illegally. In all likelihood, every bit of land that you own, if you own it, is in that land, in that area, and it was taken illegally. And you know what? There's something's got to happen. But you know what? We don't want that to impact you. We don't want your land. We don't want your own, we don't personally want your land. We know what it's like to have lost your home and lost your homeland, and we're not going to do that to anybody. So I can give you assurances from the tribes when I'm talking to them. They're saying, we don't want to disrupt people's lives. But we sure want to talk to the federal government about federal land. We want to talk to the state government about state land. So this matter is still up in the air. There's discussions going on about what's going to happen. The tribes are meeting and making discussions about what's going to happen with this. 23 million acres of land are in question. That's what we found. That's what these documents down here. When we were searching for this, I didn't expect to find anything like that. I never thought. But remember that little article that Margaret Cole said, look at this in the footnote? Prelude to War describes exactly what happened, describes exactly how it happened. And what happened was, so there was a guy with a conscience back then, and he was an assistant district attorney. He was in charge of surveying the land. And he surveyed the land and he got to the Platte River and was looking at the documents and he said, I can't survey on the other side of the land. I can't survey on the other side of the Platte River. I'm not legal. So back in, remember the Indian Trade and Intercourse Act? There was an article in there that said you couldn't survey Indian land. So he took it to heart and he said, I can't do that. He said, that's illegal for me to do that. And he put a letter into the Rocky Mountain News and it almost got him killed. You know, people were saying, this is absolutely ridiculous. How could this possibly be happening? And so the year goes by, the people didn't sign. This issue has come to the surface that, you know, that this land has been taken illegally. He can't survey it. And so he sends a letter to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Dole, and tells Dole, hey, you know, you need to do something about this because this land is not, there's no, we don't have any title. We don't have any title. We don't have ability to get title to this land. So we can't survey it. Commissioner of Indian Affairs goes to Evans, and Evans says, this is nonsense. How could this possibly be? He said, this is, you're just trying to cause the greatest Indian war that you've ever seen. And the Indian Commissioner issued a letter saying that that land was never taken and it was illegally occupied. Evans threw a fit and he said, that's not, that, you know, and he issued a proclamation telling all the Indians get to Sand Creek. Followed that up with our proclamation to kill Indians. His intent was, because he knew that he wasn't going to be able to remove 100,000 people who'd come into the land, his intent then was to do away with Indians. And then it'll clear the slate. The Commissioner of Indian Affairs in the report to the Congress noted that specifically, next page, noted that the bands weren't represented at the recent treaty, and they constantly continue to claim and roam the land claimed by the nation. Although the provision was made for the bands, no parties therefore ever, you know, they never signed. It's, you know, these are legal documents saying there's a problem out there. The next page you'll see. I hope you find it possible to arrange with the Cheyennes and Arapahoes that have not signed to do so and put them together or make some other kind of arrangement. This is Dole. This is the Indian Commissioner saying this to Evans. You know, you need to fix this. Evans is saying, you know, is saying, you know, I can't fix this. What am I going to do? And so then the next page it talks about how they were supposed to save the government money and also try to get with the Cheyenne and Arapaho and have a treaty for them to give up this land. And that never happened. It never ever happened. So this land was in limbo going into Sand Creek. After Sand Creek, there was an outroar in the country about what happened there. People were up in arms. But you know what? This disappeared. This disappeared from the scope of everything. It's been raised 3 times that I know of by historians. The first one was William Unruh in Prelude to War. The second time was a guy by the name of Elliot West in Conquest of the West. In his footnotes, he notes it. And another author by the name of Gary Roberts, one of the best historians I've ever come across in my life, notes it in his book, Massacre at Sand Creek, the responsibility of the Methodists. He notes it in there. and talks about how this land there was never any treaty for this land. And so we've got documents that show the exact thing that happened, and it wasn't just this land. I mean, this is just this is probably the biggest example of what happened. There's other documents that show the fraud on the other side, with the Southern Cheyennes and Southern Arapahoes, and I'm not going to get into those because it's very time consuming, and we report the findings in our work, and probably one of the things that you don't see is all of the findings, all the evidence. We've withheld some of the evidence that we have, like, you don't see copies of the letters from the State Department telling them they need to fix it. And then you don't see copies of the forgeries that took place to create the amendment to fix it. But we have them. We have the hard copies of the original written documents. So everything's working out right. Yeah, Indians are all gone out of the Front Range, being diminished, but there still isn't that. They're still not done. And so they've come up with this idea. Let's go to the next one. So they come up with this idea that they're going to have this great peace treaty, and it basically it's Congress, a congressional committee in Congress meets, and they say they're putting forth a statute that all laws allowing the President and the Secretary of Interior and the Commissioner of Indian Affairs to enter into treaties with Indian tribes is hereby repealed. So there's a congressional action, a committee action, to appeal treaties. Well, the next thing we see is the, let's go to the next one. In order to get this done, they have to take some other kinds of actions, and the person that was the most responsible for Indian affairs was a guy by his name was Nathan Taylor. He was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, and when he sees this, he says, if we're going to appeal these treaties, let's get all these Indians out of this territory. The Indian commissioner is saying, let's get all these Indians out of this territory. So he comes up with this policy where he's going to remove all the tribes in the central part of the United States. What his recommendation is that all the tribes in the southern part of this region are going to be moved to Oklahoma, to Indian Territory. All the tribes in the northern part of this territory, and the territory, it looks like this: continental divide of the United States to the Mississippi River, the southern border of South Dakota, and the northern border of Oklahoma. All Indians, except for a few in Kansas, had to be moved from that area. So they moved them to Oklahoma. Today, if you go up into North Dakota, South Dakota, and you look, you start at the top up there on the Missouri River, you have the Mandans. Below that, you got Standing Rock. Below that, you got Cheyenne River. Below that, you got Crow Creek, Lower Brule, Yankton, Santee, the Omahas, the Winnebagos are all on the Missouri River. Now, Pine Ridge and Rosebud were supposed to be there, but they fought it. They went out there for 1 year and they fought it. So they let them stay in western South Dakota, but the rest of them had to move. And that's why there's all those tribes along the river. I mean, it wasn't by happenstance. They removed them from this country. And the way they did it was absolutely horrendous. The next slide. Uh, I basically just said this, I just told you that's what the plan was. And so let's go to the next one. Let's talk a little bit about this Great Peace Commission. So this Peace Commission is made up of mostly military officers and a couple of other people, and they meet and they decide their action. And what they're going to do is they're going to meet with all the tribes. I think there was like 27 tribes in the area, and they met with them. And this is what it looked like. It said, what's your name, young man? Giovanni. Giovanni, we're here to talk to you about you're going to sign this document. And in this document, the first article has you giving up your land here and moving to Oklahoma. Is that okay with you? Second article is you're going to be a farmer. Is that okay with you? The third article is you're going to send all your kids to boarding schools. Is that okay with you? Well, you know what? That's too bad, because if you don't agree to this document, the annuities that are keeping you alive, you're not getting them anymore. You understand that? Are you going to sign the document? Okay, then our military is going to come in and exterminate you. That's what treaty negotiations were looking like. It's right here. This commission is not a peace commission only. It's also a war commission. Some said you wanted war, and they proposed to send the soldiers out against you and cover the plains like grass. Because they're telling them, if you don't do this, we're going to kill you. We're going to exterminate you. No doubt about it. The proposed bill before the committees of the two houses urging the passage of the following bill, setting apart organizing 2 grand reservations for the use of that's what we're talking about, moving them to South Dakota and moving them to Oklahoma. The commission consulted concerning the removal of the Indians from present location. Basically, it's about moving them to the Missouri River. The next slide, extermination is a military strategy. What happened when there's a document out there. It's called the Great Peace Commission, Proceedings of the Great Peace Commission of 1867. And in that document, it shows every one of the consultations that went on with the tribes. That's where I got that's where I got this information from, these actual interviews. And so, the people who are leading this are people who are like Sheridan. Remember Sheridan said what his opinion about this was? The only good Indian is a dead Indian. He meant it. The whole thing of this idea of peace was a subterfuge for extermination. The military really wanted to exterminate Indians. They didn't want to really have to deal with them. After they did this, they went all around to all of the places and the outcome was, these are some of the things that happened. And you have to have had a superior knowledge of what was going on to understand this. Because in one conversation, in one note in the proceedings, it says, and what are we going to do with the children? And you're thinking, what are they talking about? What children? Why are you talking about children in negotiations with a treaty? So, in the 1867 treaty at Medicine Lodge with the Cheyennes, I found some handwritten notes about those conversations. And in that handwritten note, one of the leaders said, I'm not going to sign another treaty until you return my children. What was he talking about? How did the government have children? They were children that were taken from the Sand Creek massacre site. They still had them, and they were holding them hostages in these treaty negotiations. This is a fact, people. This is exactly the stuff that came out of our findings. This is scary. This is really, this isn't right, when this commission met finally in the final meeting, they came up with a couple of recommendations. They came up with 3 recommendations, and at this last meeting, they met in Chicago in October, and one of the people that was there was Grant and Sherman, Harney, all the military people. Without treaties to protect the U.S. military's, so this is what they say. The error of the old commission's policy, Sherman explained to a reporter, had been plainly demonstrated. Too many scalps have disappeared among the heads of legitimate owners to make it safe to prolong this policy, and there was no doubt where the presumptive next president of the United States stood. General Grant told the same reporter that the settlers and immigrants had to be protected, even if it meant the extermination of every Indian tribe. Presidential policy. Now you know why there's no reservations in Colorado. Now you know the truth about what happened here. And now you know why it was hidden. Now you know why it was kept a secret. Nobody wants to acknowledge these kinds of things. And you know what? You know who the most guilty person is in this audience today? Me. I didn't know this. I should have known this growing up. I should have learned this. I should have had the opportunity to find this stuff. Instead, I'm 73 years old and I'm trying to figure out what the heck to do with this. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? It's scary. I mean, this stuff scares me. So the 3 resolutions that came, next slide, that heretofore no treaties shall be made with another Indian tribe. So the military is recommending ending the sovereign status of Indian nations unilaterally. The second one, okay, I'll tell you why they did these when I finish them. Commission recommended that the control of Indian affairs be moved to the War Department. Be it resolved that Indians of the Plains shall no longer be permitted to roam and hunt outside the reservations, that they should be directed to be removed and remain on those reservations, and that military force should be used to compel the removal of those who may choose not to go. So what you don't read in these is the corresponding military correspondence. What does this mean? It means that if you're a treaty Indian, you have rights and they can't kill you. But they want to exterminate you, so they're going to do away with your treaty rights. They want to move Indian affairs from the Secretary of Interior to the Department of War. Why? Because it's easier for them to kill Indians. That's what they're saying. We're going to, let's get it under the Department of War. Then they're our responsibility, and then you don't let them go off the reservation. If they go off the reservation, then we can kill them. So, let's try to keep, that authorizes us to be able to kill them. That's the most difficult one for me to understand is the ending of a unilateral ending of, next slide, ending the sovereign nation. Sovereign nations were diminished to nothing by an Appropriations Act in 1871. No Indian input whatsoever. And so our nations were no longer sovereign nations. Instead, in their place, the government calls them domestic dependent nations. And, you know, to this day, our people no longer have that status as sovereign nations. When they were negotiating these treaties, they were acting like sovereign nations. They had fought the United States government to a standstill on the northern plains. They weren't subservient. They weren't subservient to the United States. We weren't dependent upon the United States. They were sovereign nations. But you had to figure out a way to get rid of them. Next slide, please. So how do you keep this stuff a secret? You change, you create a vocabulary, you change the narrative. You know, so in the narrative it says these passive people who are coming in to settle this unclaimed land, and you call them settlers. You know, you give them that, but here's the reality, folks. This land was occupied by people. It was their homeland, and they were defending it. So there was conflict when these people came into their land. No different than Ukraine. You know, not at all. I mean, if you want a good comparison, you know, Russia invades Ukraine, or somebody's invading our land, and so we're defending it. And so one of the ways you disguise that is to change the narrative. You don't call yourself an invader, you call yourself a settler. And then the history changes. And so history's interesting because, you know, some of the work we did in this book here, we talk about the facts about what happened out here in Colorado. Well, this is what the facts show. Between 1848 and 1878, during that whole period of time, there were 204 Indians killed by 204 white people killed by Indians, right? That's those brutal attacks of the savages on the plains, right? The very same time period, there were 700 Indians killed. Kill rate 3 times the rate defending their land. So, you know, history has been distorted. That's why you keep it a secret. You don't want people to know this. You don't want the facts out about this kind of stuff. Because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to the honor of American people. It's embarrassing to know that this stuff actually happened this way. Next slide. They made us many promises, more than I can remember, but they never kept but one. They promised to take our land, and they took it. This is my great-great-grandfather, Red Cloud, saying this. The Oglala Lakota, leader of the Oglalas and Lakotas. You know, next slide. Restorative justice. Several years ago, the call went out for land back, and the people began to pay attention to the past wrongdoings committed against American Indians. Now is the time to call upon the United States Congress to rescind the acrimonious rider to the Indian Appropriations Act of 1870 and restore the full status of Indian nations as sovereign nations. The rider, as passed, had no Indian input. Failure to act would add the continuing insult created by the injustice that was of the misguided, false Peace Commission. It's never too late to take corrective action and repair wrongdoings. And unfortunately, given the current climate of the Congress and the courts, we're going to have to sit on this for 4 years at least before we take any action. Because it's hopeless right now, this dismay and stuff. And then the last side, it has some of our historical sites. I also everybody got a copy of this sheet of paper, and I just wanted to go over that to give you an example of what we're talking about, land transactions that went on. And if you look at this, and I'm sorry about the small print. This is actually an appendices to this report. And it shows all of the institutions that got land from people here in Colorado. So for example, the Cheyenne River Elkhorn State University, Mississippi, Colorado State University, University of Arkansas, University of Florida, University of Georgia, Polytechnical Institute, Illinois. Ohio State, for example, got land from 104 different Indian nations. You know, we think, you know, so I grew up thinking, okay, I went to the University of Nebraska. That's the land-grant college in Nebraska. And I always thought they got the land for the college from land right around it, right? I mean, that's what you kind of think. And you never think about that all of that land that they got to create those institutions came from the backs of Indian people. And this is the sheet that shows where they came from the tribes. These institutions got Indian land from here in Colorado. So that's, you know, Cornell University got 1 million acres of land. Any Cornell graduates? Uh-oh.
I found out when I read the High Country News article.
Yes. So, see, I'm not making stuff up, guys. And now we've come to that very special time for questions, right? I've given you a tremendous amount of information, and now it's your opportunity to yes. Next steps. That's a good question. I think we're gonna kind of lay low for a while to try to figure out exactly what should be happening. But I thought about this, and I've done a lot of deep dives into this thing about how do you do restoration, and how can it be done in such a way that it causes the least amount of harm for people in the state of Colorado. Because you're my relatives, you're my neighbor. I don't want you disrupted. But what if we said, got Colorado State Legislature to pass an act? And in that act, they said, going forward, because of all of these issues, we're going to assign a 1.5% fee, not a tax. We have to really be careful in Colorado. A fee on future real estate transactions. So anybody that bought property going forward, both commercial, private residential, they would pay a 1.5% fee. You know, closing costs are not very much. I mean, you know, then adding another, 1.1%, 1.5% doesn't mean a lot, except when you look at the totality. 1.5% would generate about $120 million a year that could go back to the coffers of Indian people to begin acquiring land and restoring themselves to this area. One of our other reports, we talk about the dismal condition of the education system for our children. Our children have the highest dropout rates, the lowest achievement rates. They're failing. The system is failing them. You know what? In 1862, when they were doing the Morrill Act with the land-grant colleges, they passed what was called the school fund. So when Colorado became a state in 1876, they got the land for the school fund. 3.8 million acres of land. Today, they still have 2.8 million acres of land from that time. It's generating about $150 million a year, and has been for forever. I know some of you older people, there was a big scandal with that school fund where, one of our governors was using it for his personal friends and making sure that they got leases, and there was a big scandal a few years ago about that. So they've tried to correct that. $150 million a year coming out of the school fund, right? Not a dime has ever found its way into the pockets of Indian education. And yet all of that land came from Indian people. So you see, there's other kinds of alternatives that we can look at. We could ask the state legislature to ask the land board to do an appropriation so that we can build a comprehensive Indian education program in Colorado and do things like have pre-collegiate programs for our students, maybe in 3 institutions across the state. We could start making a difference I was been an educator all my life. I advocated, but our children need a different kind of an education. They think differently, they see the world differently, and their cognitive processing is different, and you have to adjust that and help them deal with the Western methodological processing, and they do well. When you do that, they're superior students. But we know that, but we're not able to do it. Next question.
I would hit the number one issue that you just touched on, beyond all the reparations and everything else, education. The issue here is that you said education for Indian people. The number one issue is education for the greater society in Colorado. If they don't know this story, and they don't know what's happened, and we certainly didn't know, and there's a lot of knowledgeable people in this room, and like yourself, you said you didn't know the background of it. If you don't have that groundwork laid in the general population so that the kids, the students growing up, know what's happened, know what the history is, you're still going to have license plates that say pioneer. They're so proud that they settled this land here. It was like, oh, vacant land. Well, it wasn't vacant land. It was confiscated land. I mean, that's just a little tiny thing. But I would say that's the primary issue. It's not about jumping to, and you said a real estate fee. Then inherent in real estate in Colorado is a very deep, deep block on letting people know that the land actually was confiscated. It's there, absolutely, positively, because of the idea that American Indian people keep land, they use the land, they retain it in common use, they don't buy it and sell it and treat it as a commodity. I mean, these are really fundamental concepts, and it's about education. Anyway, that's my thought on it.
Just one little thing that we were able to do is we introduced curriculum for the 3rd and 4th grade in the middle schools. We're just about done with the curriculum for high schools. Boulder County is using it.
Right.
So we did one, but it has to be a lot more than that. It has to be a lot more than that. There needs to be more public hearings like this that talk about those kinds of things. And we have a question in the back. Thank you, though. You're absolutely right.
The epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, people, in your opinion, as a scholar, why is it continuing to happen? Who is doing it? How do we stop it?
Very good question. Part of it is this whole idea of jurisdictional areas. So like if somebody from my reservation comes to Denver and they become a murdered or missing Indigenous person, in the past, we have the act now, and we are making significant progress. And I know it personally, but in the past, I had a niece that was killed here in Colorado, and it's still unsolved because nobody cared about it. There was no jurisdictions that stepped up and said, this is somebody we want to, there's no, Crime Stopper story about it. There's none of that stuff because it didn't matter. Who, the local police departments, the state patrol, they had no jurisdiction over those kinds of things if it was an Indian person. So they just let it go. And so, that's the kind of thing the new act has done. My granddaughter ran away 2 years ago, 13 years old. She ran away from home. It's an unfortunate story, but she did. She disappeared. She's gone overnight. I find out about it in the middle of the night, and so I had the resources and knowledge to implement the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Act in our local police department. And at first, they said, oh, she's just a runaway, we're not going to do anything for 24 hours, and then you can put a missing persons report together. But that's not what the act called for. The act called for immediate action, because we knew that there was a potential, that we know because of that law, we knew the potential of what has been happening with children and women being taken and just disappearing. We were lucky because within an hour, it flashed on the TV screen that she was missing. Before 2 hours were up, we found her in Aurora, 50 miles away. And only because we were able to act and we had the resources to make that act become real. And I fought the Broomfield Police Department because they said, we can't do anything. And so I started calling. I called the State Patrol. I called everybody. And they said, yes, you have to do something. You don't get to wait because it's too critical. And so I know it personally, so I know good, effective legislation can make a difference, and it is making a difference. And we have some very powerful women that are really helping with that.
Is that a Colorado law you're referring to?
Now it's almost all states across the United States. But what happens is you have, especially like you have jurisdictional issues. So you have a reservation and somebody leaves the reservation, the police in the reservation don't have any authority to do anything off the reservation. And the police off the reservation don't have any jurisdiction over it. The FBI do, so it was a mishmash of disconnect. And that's why it was, happened and continued to happen. I think we still have 23 missing and murdered Indigenous people in Colorado on the poster. Yes.
So what can we who are here today do to help you?
Pray. We're still developing the strategies. We're still working on trying to figure out exactly how we can move forward to engage and create the. We need. You know what? We really need you. We need you to be there for allies for us. To be there when there's a bill being introduced in the legislature. To make comments about it and offer your opinion about it. We absolutely need that. We need you to be sending letters to the Attorney General's office saying, what are you going to be doing about this? What's happening with this? Because if it's like the proclamations, they're just going to ignore us. It's like they have in the past. I mean, that's just we don't have a single American Indian person in the state legislature. We don't have a voice. We're powerless people. We're the most powerless people in Colorado. We don't have. But you know what? I'm gonna switch the questions here real quick. My turn to ask a question. Why are you here? I want you to close your eyes just for a minute. Close your eyes and think. Why are you here? Anybody want to answer?
So I'll answer first. I'm here because I am so sorry. And every Sunday we say that we honor this land we walk upon, and it belonged to the Cheyenne and the Arapaho and the Utes, and it feels so meaningless. And so I'd like to know more. There's the Hughes Stadium issue happening up in Fort Collins. I don't know if you're familiar with that, and whether there's something, I don't know what the status of that is. I don't know how that fits within the larger perspective of the taking land back. But if there's something we can do there to help, I just, I feel powerless and I feel responsible. And that's why I'm here.
I guess I have a question and an answer. Because I love the land here, I grew up in Southern California. The whole of, I love all land, but the land here is very special, and I can feel the haunt of it. And then, if I could, I have a question. It's a little sidebar, but growing up in California, it's a very similar story. Los Angeles doesn't have Indian reservations, and it's a lot of expensive land that had the Chumash and the Tongva people. And there was a thing called the California genocide, where hundreds of thousands of Indians were killed, also in direct massacres, like with the gold rush, very similar story. Is something like this happening there that you know of, like an accounting?
Not yet.
It needs
This is
to.
the
I
first
want to
of-
be a part of that.
This is the first in the country. We've created this as a model for other Indian nations, other states, if they want to pursue this. We try to build this in such a way that it's replicatable anywhere in the United States. So I'm going to ask it again. I want to know why you're here. There's got to be, what is it about? What is it about what I'm talking about? Why you're here?
Hi, I'm Reverend Dana Lightsey. It's nice to be here. I'm the minister here. And I'll answer, well, why I am here, and that's because I care very deeply, and I want to make a difference and do everything that we can. So I'm going to ask you if you could communicate with us about when we can advocate, when we can write those letters. And I would like to ask all of us to commit to following through on showing up. Hey, we're happy to show up at the Capitol and speak, aren't we? Yes? You bet. Absolutely. We're happy to write those letters. We're happy to advocate. We just need to know when and how. And I also want to say that there is a continued progress with Christinia's organization. I always say the name wrong. I apologize, so I'm not going to try. Oh, Andre's here. Fantastic. Andre, can you give us an update about, because you guys just had a meeting like yesterday, but we have to use the microphone because people on Zoom, it won't make it on the recording, and people on Zoom won't hear it. So I'm going to pass the microphone to you.
Hello, and thank you all for your interest in seeing these lands returned to their original stewards, and for your interest in the current happenings at the former Hughes Stadium site in Fort Collins. My name is Andre Dunn, and I am the intern extraordinaire for Unchi Christinia's organization called Tiosh Paye Winyamaka, which means Extended Family of Women of the Earth in the Lakota language. And since 2020, Indigenous leaders here in Northern Colorado and our community members more widely have been having discussions and leading civil demonstrations, contacting members of CSU and members of the city of Fort Collins, attending city council sessions, boards and commission meetings, and every opportunity that the city has given for us to engage with them directly. And our ask is that that site be rematriated, completely returned to Indigenous stewardship. But there are many different third-party interests that want to have a stake in the future of that land, and we are welcoming them all to have a part to play in the future of the land. But right now, the city has gone forth with what they're calling a civic assembly, which is a public engagement process meant to engage Fort Collins residents most specifically, but the prelude to this civic assembly process, which will be in April and May, is called the Hughes Process Community Guides Program. And so for the past week, and for the next few days, there will be a survey available by the city of Fort Collins. There's a Coloradan article that has been made on this that sort of really does give the vibe of the possibility of this land being returned. And so the survey is available on that website, and I'll be sending it out to all of our support networks as well, probably today. And part of that community guides program that's going to be influencing the civic assembly and the deliberations that happen in April and May on the future of that site is is this community guides process. And so there's 26 of us going out having community conversation circles with different areas of the public, essentially. And so we're making it our goal to engage as many underrepresented and marginalized voices as possible. We're extending our reach beyond Fort Collins. We've been given permission by the folks organizing this to bring in tribal voices, like tribal historic preservation officers, different folks who represent governments, and we've also brought in a lot of the faith-based leaders of churches and mosques, temples that support our bid to have that as ceremonial space, because we know that there are hundreds of temples, churches, and such across the Front Range, but there is no really dedicated and public area for us to hold our ceremonies and our rites of passage, and so that's what we want to use the Hughes site for. We'll be holding the last of our community conversation circles tomorrow at the United Way of Larimer County, a community impact center. That's at 525 West Oak Street in Fort Collins, Colorado. And we'll be holding those conversations in our offices. It's a very cozy place where we can really talk about the future. And we're going to be bringing in the last 3 conversations that we've had, all of the values and principles and wants and needs that we've heard from the community. We're going to be bringing into this final conversation and then using the data from all of these conversations to influence CSU Center for Public Deliberation, Healthy Democracy in the City of Fort Collins as they make decisions on this site moving forward. The City of Fort Collins is expected to vote on a final master plan, a specific path forward for the site in August of this year. So, tomorrow's meeting, if you'd like to join us, I believe I can gather some emails if you'd like me to send you an email reminding you tomorrow, but it'll be at 4 o'clock at the United Way of Larimer County tomorrow in Fort Collins. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Rick. I'm Gail Marie Kimmel. Thanks for being here. I'm here because my family's history is all tangled up in this. I grew up with War Department documents showing that my ancestors had been forcibly removed from what is now Indiana to the Kansas Territory. And I'm always trying to piece together the timeline of how I inherited my own great-great-grandmother's stories, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you. It's a learning curve. And I grew up being very proud of being a native Coloradoan. And I have since changed my language to settler Coloradoan. And now you're prompting me to think about whether or not I'm brave enough to say invader Coloradoan. I don't know. Let me work on that one, Rick. But thank you. Thank you for your work.
We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to close this in a very important way. I asked that question specifically because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to suggest why. We have a prophecy that goes back to the beginning of people coming into this country, to this land, 500 and some years ago. And in that prophecy, and I was reminded of it as a young man when I was about 19 years old at a sweat lodge on Crow Dog's Paradise on the Rosebud Reservation. And at the time, I never thought it was going to become a reality. But in our prophecy, it says that after 7 generations, now, don't think about the European concept of generation, because that's different than ours. Our generation is, a generation for me is, I knew my great-grandmother. And I hope I know my great-grandchildren. That's one generation, about 80 years. So over a period of time, and what they said is that when the 7th generation of the people who came to this land is here, they're going to be able to understand and know what needs to be done, because they become like-minded with Indians. And so think about that for a minute. Okay, this is how it works. Every time you take a drink of water, every time you eat food from the land that's grown here on this soil, you're getting genetic codes from ancestors that have gone back thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. And those genetic codes are in your blood and in your body now. And you're starting to think like Indians. You're starting to act like Indians. I never thought it was going to happen. In my lifetime, I didn't see it happening. I see it happening. I see it happening in our communities. You know, the Creator knew what they were doing when they created this body of ours, and they created the mechanisms for us. In our way, we've always said, we end our prayers and we talk about Midaku Yasi. We're all related. You know, so we are all related. And you're more related to us now than you ever were in the history of this country. And that's why maybe you can't help yourself. Maybe you have to have some empathy. Maybe you have to believe, because, you know, you're part of it now. And that, you know, and people say, how can you say that, Rick? I'll say it because there was a recent study that came out of Canada. And what that study showed that the Plains Indians who ate buffalo meat, in 200 years ago, the native people of the Plains were the tallest people in the world. And after not having buffalo for 200 years, we've shrunk by an inch. So if it can have, if that kind of thing can have a physiological impact on your body within 200 years, we're all getting it. We can't help it. Every time you take a drink of water, you're getting, you know, those, whatever it is that we don't know about, what the Creator has created for us. And that's why we are, you know, in our, you know, we understood that. We've understood that we're all of one people. You know, you look at that medicine wheel up there on it. I love it. Red, yellow, white, and black. That's what we mean, all our relatives. So I know somebody in here understands it pretty well, or it wouldn't be up there. Thank you very much. I'm real honored to be able to be here and share stories, and appreciate you taking the time. And
I just want to say thank you very much for bringing this information and closing with that great vision and that heart and spirit of the Native people, that we are coming together as one family. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the most important thing we can do right now, is to put our focus on that and open our hearts to all colors of people. That's the essence of the Native vision, heart, and spirit that I was given by Wallace Black Elk in 1990 when we met, and I saw through him the true nature of the universe, that we are all one, and science is now proving that. And so it's that time now. Mm-hmm. And Wallace was a very close friend for 15 years, and as are his descendants. And that's been my message to the world for 30 years since I met Wallace. And I would just like to say that you're that catalyst, bringing that information for us, but also saying, hey, the vision is and the knowledge is that we are coming together as one people, and that's our responsibility to do that.
oh,
So again, Thank you, Rick, and thanks to all of you. I didn't really bring a sign-up sheet or anything, but we could use some papers in the back if anybody wants to sign their name and email address or something. If we want to send out messages to you all, we can have you do that at the back. Clay is holding a donation basket in case anyone would like to share with that. And remember that we're having food next door as soon as we make our way over there. Again, thank you, Rick. Thank you, all of you.
These documents will be available on our website probably beginning next week for purchase online.